Linux Essentials. In this video, we're going to talk about Xwindows, shell scripts, and Lilo, the Linux loader, three very powerful features of Linux. Let's start with Xwindows. Xwindows is a hardware-independent, network-based Windows system. It's not a graphical user interface by itself, but very powerful GUIs can be built on top of Xwindows. We're going to talk about the different desktop environments and window managers that you can choose from, and how to configure those so they do exactly what you want. And then we'll move on and talk about shell scripts. We already know what a shell is, right? Like the bash shell. The shell allows us, the user, to interact with the kernel by typing commands. And shell scripts are basically just collections of those commands, but they also allow us to loop so we can do things over and over again, and test conditions so we can execute certain commands only when certain conditions are met. And that makes it a powerful sort of mini programming language. And then we'll talk about Lilo, the Linux loader. When you start your computer, the first thing that kicks in is what we call the BIOS, the basic input-output system. And that checks your hardware to make sure it's functioning correctly. And then a bootloader takes over to start up an operating system. And Lilo is a bootloader, and it's capable of booting Linux. And we'll talk about some configuration options for Lilo. So let's get started. There's three major components to Xwindows. There's the X server, the window manager, and the desktop environment. The X server is responsible for the raw graphic output to your screen, the character placement, the pixel placement in a picture, that kind of stuff. That's what the X server does. X-free86 is the name of the X server, and you can find out all about X-free86 at this website, xfree86.org. The latest version of X-free86 is 4.0 point something. Now the window manager, that's responsible for taking that raw graphic output and putting a border on it, a title bar. Now that might seem like fluff, just the border and the title bar, but really that's what controls the look and the feel. We click on that border and we drag it, that resizes the window. Or we click on the title bar and we drag it, that moves the window. Or we click on those icons in the top corner and that minimizes the window or deletes it altogether. Okay? So that's what the look and the feel is of the window, of the Xwindows system, is in the window manager. Now the desktop environment, that's sort of one step larger. When you think about a Macintosh or a Windows operating system, it's not just the window manager and moving the windows around that really distinguishes the operating system. What distinguishes it is all those graphical utilities and configuration programs. In Windows, or you can point and click and set up everything. Your microphone volume, your screen resolution display, everything like that is just set up in some graphical configuration program. And the Linux desktop environments have those abilities as well, have those utilities and configuration programs. The most popular desktop environments you'll hear about are KDE, which is the K desktop environment. There's GNOME, which is the one I'm using. There's CDE, which is the common desktop environment. There's some other ones. The most popular window managers are KWM for the K window manager. There's Solfish, which is the one I'm using. There's ICE window manager. And again, there's more of these. You can experiment, look out on the web, see which ones there are, download them, try them out, see which one you like the best. You know, they're all useful. They all have little bit different traits, but they all basically do the same thing. Like I said, the window manager provides like that look and the feel, and the desktop environment provides all those configuration programs and graphical utilities. So let's go and experiment with our Xwindows system now, and I'll show you where some of this stuff is. Okay, so let's take a little tour of some of these configuration tools. Down here under the GNOME main menu, I click on that. I go to Programs, I go to Settings, and let's look at a couple things in here. Let's look at Desktop first. The desktop, the various menus in here, the background is just that blue background, and you can change that. The screensaver, what comes on when you're idle. The theme selector is kind of just like a general color shading scheme, what clicked on windows look like, what non-clicked on windows look like. The fact that this thing up here right now says that is kind of gray, that's part of the theme selector. When I click on it, it turns blue. That's so on, stuff like that. Under Window Manager, that's where you can choose your window manager. Under Panel, you pick things like, when I move my cursor around, you see how these things light up. That's part of the panel description, okay? Under peripherals here, we can change properties, CD, keyboard, mouse, repeat rate, stuff like that. Down here under Solfish Window Manager, I can change all sorts of stuff. One of the first things that you can do is sort of the meta adjustment. It says, what kind of user are you? Are you a novice, an intermediate, an expert? I would say check it at least so it's intermediate, and maybe even expert, even if you're a new user, because then at least you see all the different options that are out there, and you can configure it so it works just like you want. Okay. Then there's the appearance, how windows look, focus behavior. I like to set it up so that when I move my mouse into the window, it focuses, meaning that I can type and my characters will appear in that window instead of having to click on the window to focus it. And you might say, wow, that's really type A, but it's just something that I've learned over time, and I really like it, so I always set up my focus that way. Okay, and you do have that option. If you don't care, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. But the fact is, there's all these configurations here, and you should do it just the way you like it to work. You can set it up to minimize and maximize windows. You can move and resize windows. You can change those properties. Placement, like where a window comes when you open up a new terminal, where should that be? Should it be centered? Should it be justified to the left or justified to the right, and so on? What kinds of sound should appear for certain kinds of events when you close a window or when you do something, when you make some error? And then there's workspaces. Workspaces are like different screens, really. Like it's all on the same computer. But say you've got a bunch of windows open and you're working on some project, and then somebody comes to you and says, hey, I need my password changed. Okay? And then you say, well, geez, I'm right in the middle of this. You don't want to close all those windows and get in the way of that. So what you can do is you can go to a new workspace and then do that thing there. Let me show you how that works. Over here down in the very right bottom corner, if I click on this other button, that takes me to a new workspace. So I can open a new window in there, I can do something, I can become the root user, okay, and I can do something in there, and, oops, did that wrong, and, but you get the idea. So I go to this new window, and, I do a listing over here, okay, I do something over here, and now I'm done, and I can go back to that first workspace, and that's where I was originally, okay? So the workspace idea, it's just sort of like a little bit of an organization tool, so you don't have to get too cluttered with too many windows working on something at once. Okay. Now another thing down here under the settings is the menu editor, so you can change what comes up in this menu here. Okay, so if I go to the menu editor, you'll see, okay, reading all the menus, and now I'm in the menu editor, and what I can do is I can change what comes up under the settings menu. Okay, so there I am under the settings menu. There's the Sawfish window manager. There's all the stuff that was in there. If I find that I don't ever change some of these things, and I think it's too cluttered, I can take some of those things out. Okay, again, that's all configurable. It's all up to you. All right, so that stuff that we just did, that's to configure the look and feel, what items are in the menus on the desktop, how the windows focus, things like that. And if you need to configure something at a more low level, though, you have to change the XF86 config file. And one of the tools that you can use to do that in Red Hat is called Xconfigurator. You have to be the super user to use it, so I'll switch over first. And then it's a capital X followed by configurator. And you type that in, and like I said, it's changing the XF86 config file. And that's in the etc x11 directory, probably. It could be in user x11r6 lib x11 as well. And if you're going to do this by hand, if you're not going to use Xconfigurator or you don't have Red Hat, I would suggest at least looking around to see if there is a graphical X Windows configuration tool. And if there's not, then go ahead and just edit it manually. Certainly read the README file first, because it'll tell you what all the different sections of the config file are for and how to alter them and so on. Okay, so again, this is like the other ones that we've seen. You tab through, and I'm going to hit spacebar to say OK. And now it says choose a video card. Okay, so I'm going to page down here and pick a video card. If you don't have one, you can pick unlisted card, and then it's going to do some sort of generic selection there for you. And here's my card here, NVIDIA GeForce 2. I'm going to tab to OK and hit spacebar. And now it says what kind of monitor do you have. Again, I'm going to have to page down because I don't have an Acer monitor naturally. That would be too easy. And I'm paging down through this. If you don't have a monitor that's in this list, which would be pretty hard to believe because the list is pretty long, as you can see, definitely choose custom, and then you have to manually enter your refresh rates. And don't mess up there. Don't enter them too high, because then you could end up damaging your monitor. Okay, so be careful. Look at the refresh rates in the manuals. Make sure that you understand exactly what kind of refresh rates they're talking about, and don't choose maximums. Choose the standard ones, and you'll be okay. If your monitor is in the list, like mine is here, the Philips 107S, then again you just choose OK. And now it's going to do the screen configuration. Now what they do usually is you probe this, and then it'll get the best sort of video mode and color depth for your computer. All right? I'm going to choose don't probe because I don't want it to go on. It says here that it could lock up your system. I've tried it and it doesn't lock up my system, but it does sort of flash wildly and it looks really bad on the video. So I'll just say don't probe here. but you could probe if you wanted to and try it out. So then it's going to ask me to manually enter some of this information. I'm going to say OK. It says don't choose